Welcome to Moonlit Romantic, your place for tender stories to fall asleep to, where love glimmers quietly like stars against winter skies. Tonight's story is Frosted Vows. Lila Montgomery has built her life on quiet strength, steady routines, peaceful weekends, a heart carefully guarded. But when she agrees to help her best friend's wedding at a mountain resort shimmering with chandeliers and snow, she finds herself face to face with Ethan Hale, the man who once held her heart and broke it. Among frosted arches, sparkling lights, and the promise of midnight, Lila must decide if forgiveness can be found in winter's stillness, and whether love, once lost, can be rebuilt under falling snow. So settle in, let the night be kind, and let the story begin. Chapter 1, Winter Reunion. Lila Montgomery had always believed winter possessed a particular silence, the kind that did not feel empty, only attentive, like a page waiting for ink. The mountain road curled upward beneath her, tires, and with each bend, the world grew wider, quieter, more expectant. Pines wore shawls of snow, icicles glittered from eaves, like strings of tiny bells. She cracked the window just enough to taste the air, crisp as bitten apple, and breathed in the faraway scent of wood smoke. Somewhere, above the cloud line, the resort waited with its chandeliers and champagne, a palace built of light. She had promised herself this would be simple. She would arrive, help her best friend orchestrate a beautiful New Year's Eve wedding, make sure the small disasters stayed small, and then she would slide back into the tidy rhythm of the life she had built. Work, friends, quiet weekends, where the kettle was on before the sun could complain. She had earned her peace the hard way, brick by brick, careful brick. She told herself nothing here could topple it. The resort appeared between two stands of fir, as if the mountain had opened its hand. Stone and glass, timber and glitter. The Winter Crest Lodge. Lanterns lined the long circular drive, flickering a soft gold against snow that had been cleared so neatly it looked brushed. A pair of bellmen moved, like practiced dancers, ferrying suitcases, while the revolving door spun with a hush beyond the front windows. Layla could see a lobby full of warm light, a towering tree, dressed in frosted, ornaments, and a fireplace with flames the color of ripe apricots. She parked, switched off the engine, and let her shoulders settle before stepping out. Snow squeaked under her boots. The air kissed her cheeks pink. Inside, winter gave way to something like celebration. The lobby ceiling soared, garlands twined, with crystal stars drooped along the mezzanine. A quartet in an alcove played a velvet soft melody, Piano, cello, a brush against a snare, the distant chime of a vibraphone. Lila's breath eased. She slipped off her gloves and tucked them in her coat pocket. She could do this. She had done harder things. Lila. She turned as the rush of cinnamon and laughter collided with her. Maya Laurent, her best friend since college, swept her into a hug that felt like a blanket fresh from the dryer. Maya's dark hair was twisted into the kind of bun that said she had meant to be practical and somehow ended up elegant. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her eyes bright with the delirious energy of a bride. With 70 lists and exactly one more sleep before rehearsal. "You are really here," Maya said, squeezing once more before pulling back to take in Lila's face. "I know it has not been forever, but it feels like it. You look good. City good. Peaceful good." "Peaceful is aspirational," Lila said, smiling. "But I am here and I am yours. Consider me your early holiday miracle." Maya looped her arm through Lila's and steered her toward the check-in desk. "You are my always miracle." "Okay, plan. You rest a little, then we do a walkthrough before the tasting. Hot cocoa with the caterer. Which is basically my personality now. The florist is downstairs, constructing an ice arch that looks dangerous and magnificent, and I am in love with it. The band arrives tonight for a sound check. I have solved 8 crises already, and invented 3 more, so you will feel needed." Lila laughed, letting Maya's swirl of joy wrap around her. "Point me wherever you want me." "First, your room," Maya said. "Corner suite. The view will forgive anything." The front desk attendant slid over a keycard envelope with winter blue lettering. "Welcome to Winter Crest, Miss Montgomery. Luggage up in a moment. The Laurent Whitaker party is in the Aspen Wing." Layla's heart twitched at the hyphen in the envelope. Laurent Whitaker, Maya and Grant. It suited them. The spark and the steady, the laugh and the anchor. She had never doubted they were right for each other. As they crossed the lobby, Lila tried not to stare at the ice sculpture glistening near the fireplace. A pair of doves mid-flight, their wings etched so delicately. The light seemed to live inside the ice. She paused anyway, mesmerized by the way firelight curled within frost. "Magic," she murmured. "Right?" Maya sighed. "I asked for festive." They delivered enchanted. "Wait until you see the ballroom. Frosted boughs over the dance floor. Tiny lights tucked like stars. I am attempting not to float away entirely." They reached the elevator. As the doors slid open, a trio of groomsmen spilled out in a cheerful blur of laughter and cologne, nearly colliding with luggage and apologies, and a cart piled with champagne flutes. Maya stepped aside with a grin. Grant's friends are good chaos. You will like them. They keep trying to outdo one another on cufflinks. "Of course they do," Lila said, amused. The elevator doors hushed shut, and the car lifted. Lila's ears popped gently. Snow swirled beyond the glass, as if the mountain were scribbling notes. "I cannot say this enough," Maya said, suddenly softer. "Thank you for coming. I know holidays are complicated. I know this place, this time of year. It can push old buttons." Lila kept her gaze on the floors, blinking past. "I am okay. You are strong," Maya said. That is different. Lila pressed her lips together. Strong and okay can overlap. Maya squeezed her hand. They can. I just want you to have gentleness too. I am practicing, Lila said, letting a small, earnest smile show. The elevator chimed. Lead on. Her suite did indeed forgive most things. Windows hugged two walls, showing the valley spread out like a snow-laced quilt. In the distance, firs clustered like choristers. The ski runs braided down the opposite ridge in pale ribbons. The room itself was all soft textures and winter blues. A throw blanket that invited naps. A stone fireplace with a stack of logs. A tray with 2 porcelain mugs and a handwritten note. Welcome, Lila. Cocoa at 4 in the Aspen Ballroom tasting. We are so glad you are here. Below the words, a little drawing of a snowflake had been inked with surprising care. Greta, the events manager, Maya said, reading Lila's glance. She is a marvel. She and I have been whispering to each other across spreadsheets for months. We finish each other's emails now. Lila laughed. A modern love story. Speaking of which, Maya said, and Lila knew that tone. It was the careful kind, the stepping stones before waterfall kind. There is something I should tell you. Lila set her coat on the bed and looked at her friend. Tell me. Maya chewed the inside of her cheek. Grant's best man is here. He arrived early to help with everything. And he is... Lila's breath caught. She felt it. A tiny fissure under the ice of her calm. Ethan, she said, the name landing like a note in a quiet room. Maya's shoulders softened. Yes. For a heartbeat, the world did nothing. The piano in the lobby continued its velvet song somewhere below. A snowcat hummed faintly on a distant slope. Lila's pulse made its own quiet music and then steadied, stubborn and disciplined. Okay, she said, when she could trust her voice. Thank you for telling me. Maya reached for her hand again. If you want, I can ask Grant to... No, Lila said, perhaps too quickly. She softened the word. No, you are marrying his closest friend. Life is not a seating chart I can fix without consequences. It is all right. Is it? I will make it so, Lila said. She meant it. She had taught herself how to take care of the shape of her days. She could do this too. Maya nodded, worry still perched at the corner of her eye. You do not have to be brave for me. Maybe I am being brave for me, Lila murmured. Also, for the ice arch. It deserves heroism. That coaxed a laugh from Maya, and the tension loosened a fraction. Rest a little. I will come back for you before Coco. When the door closed, Lila let herself sit. The chair by the window cradled her. The mountains arranged themselves into something like counsel. She had not spoken Ethan's name aloud in years, not out of bitterness, but because the syllables carried their own weather. Once upon a time, his name had meant summer and motion. A grin across a crowded room, warm hands around cold fingers in early spring. Then it had meant the hollow, left by a choice that had not been hers. He had asked her to understand. She had said she did. The truth had been more complicated. Breathe, she told herself now. And she did. Outside, flurries flitted by, like notes in the margin of the day. She stood and crossed to the little tray, lifted the porcelain lid from a dish of sugar cubes, and took comfort in their neatness. Then she washed her face in cold water, put on a sweater the color of heather, and told the mirror, "We will be gracious. We will be fine." The mirror, being a mirror, merely offered her back. By the time Maya returned, Lila had collected her calm like a cloak. They walked together down the carpeted hall, their steps muffled, their conversation light. The Aspen ballroom's doors stood open at the end of the corridor, fizzing with a kind of pre-party electricity. Inside, long tables were set with tasting plates, glistening chocolate truffles, dusted with edible snow, tiny tartlets wearing jewel-bright fruit, bite-sized savory choux, with clouds of smoked salmon mousse. Caterers moved like a choreography of kindness, refilling carafes of cocoa that perfumed the air with chocolate, vanilla, and the faintest hum of cinnamon. Greta, the events manager, appeared at once, a woman in her 40s with quick eyes, a sleek bob, and a smile precise enough to hold anything together. "Our Lila," she said, as if they had known each other for years. "You are even more punctual than your emails. I should have guessed." "Punctuality is my love language," Lila said, and Greta laughed, tapping her clipboard. "We are doing a quick pass at the midnight timeline after we taste," Greta said. "We have the fireworks scheduled to begin at the first stroke, but we can delay by a breath if you want the kiss to land just before light." Maya put a hand to her heart. "Say it again. The kiss." Greta winked. "The kiss." They tasted. Cocoa first, the cups warmed between palms, while snow mumbled against the windows. Lila felt herself soften with the heat and sugar. The staff took notes when Maya declared a preference for the blend with a whisper of orange zest. Truffles required careful debate. Someone suggested a champagne ganache and produced it in minutes, as if conjuring from thin air. Lila, who had once built a life on improvisation, found herself charmed by late magic. The ballroom doors opened, and a draft of winter wandered in. Layla glanced up, and the world found a new stillness without needing to ask. Ethan Hale stood in the doorway, one hand on the brass handle, the other holding a stack of black velvet boxes tied with silver ribbon. Snow dusted the shoulders of his charcoal coat. He had always carried winter well. He stepped inside, shook the flakes from his hair with a self-conscious sweep, and offered Greta a rueful smile for the interruption. "I come bearing cufflinks," he said, his voice warm, deeper than she remembered. It traveled across the room and arrived in Lila as if it had never forgotten the way. Maya moved quickly, an instinctive buffer of hospitality and care, greeting him with a quick hello, a quicker glance at Layla, and then a more ceremonial introduction that Lila did not need. "Ethan, you remember Lila." He turned, and for a heartbeat, the room was only a room with windows, and the smell of cocoa and the sound of someone stacking plates, except that it was also the past, rearranging itself to accommodate the present. His eyes found hers. The color had always been an ocean tucked inside hazel, green when the light caught it, brown when he was tired, impossible when he laughed. Now they were something else. Older, yes, but also unguarded, in a way that made Lila's careful breathing change. "Hello, Lila," he said. No nickname, no banter, just her name, offered like a steadying hand. "Hello, Ethan," she returned, and she was proud of how even the words sounded, how they stood upright without wobbling. The room resumed around them. Greta swooped in to relieve him of the boxes, admiring the engraved snowflake on the lids. Maya pointed him toward a tray and insisted on cocoa. Lila felt her feet forget their obligations and carry her toward the nearest tablecloth, where she focused on aligning a votive candle with its reflection in the polished wood. "Those need no help," Ethan said gently from a few steps away. "They have already been persuaded into perfection." She turned. He had taken off his coat. Beneath it, he wore a soft black sweater and a collared shirt open at the throat, the kind of effort that looks like none. There was stubble along his jaw and lines at the eyes that had not been there before. Time had not been unkind. It had been thorough. "Greta is very good," Lila said. "The room would keep itself standing without any of us. I suspect it keeps itself because certain people insist upon it," he said, and there was a flicker of that old humor, banked but warm. She lifted a truffle as if it were an argument and took a small, deliberate bite. The champagne ganache answered with soft fireworks. "This is excellent." "It is," he agreed. "I could be persuaded to develop opinions about dessert if this is the standard." "Dangerous." She set the truffle down carefully. "People with opinions about dessert become intolerable very quickly." He laughed, that remembered sound lower now, a little hoarse at the edges. The part of her that had armored itself against nostalgia felt the sound and recognized the shape of it. Like a key in a lock she had changed and yet, which still turned. Maya's presence fluttered back, bright as always. "Ethan, we are reviewing the midnight sequence. Greta wants to know whether the fireworks should begin at the stroke or a breath after." "The stroke," Ethan said, without missing a beat. "Light should arrive exactly when promised." Greta made a satisfied checkmark. Spoken like a man who has kept a crowd content in a snowstorm. Lila watched him answer questions about seating and sound, watched him shoulder a practical task the way he always had, uncomplaining, quietly efficient. It had been one of the first things she had loved about him. His tendency to show up wherever an extra pair of hands would help. His ability to be where the work needed doing without fanfare. Once upon a time, he had brought that steadiness into her life, like a gift he did not know he was giving. Once upon a time, he had taken it away, because staying would have compromised something. He could not, in fairness, ask her to let him compromise. They made it through the tasting intact. Lila contributed preferences for the midnight toast, just enough sweetness, nothing that clings, and suggested a soft transition between the last slow song and the countdown, so the room could breathe. She said all the right things, and she meant them, and that, she realized, was its own kind of grace. When the trays began to clear, the group drifted to the far end of the ballroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows held the valley like a painting. Snow fell with a new seriousness now, big flakes committing themselves to their descent. Greta reviewed the plan one more time, satisfied at last that the universe would cooperate, if asked kindly. "Thank you, everyone," she concluded. "We will reconvene tomorrow for the rehearsal. Lila, may I steal you for 5 minutes afterward to look at the escort card layout? Ethan, the band leader, wants to confirm the best man's toast timing." "Of course," they said together. And Lila felt the small tug of a smile at the old rhythm of their shared competence. The band leader materialized and attached himself to Ethan, speaking in a quick drizzle of details. Greta beckoned Lila toward a side table, where name cards stood like small tents in tidy valleys. Layla leaned over them, mind engaged, hands steady. She did not look up when footsteps approached again, but she did not need to. She felt the air change when he stopped a respectful distance away. "Walk with me?" he asked quietly, when Greta had been called to the other end of the room, "just to the terrace. It is..." He gestured at the windows, searching for the word. "A lot. And also, I owe you a hello that belongs to outside air." Layla glanced at the terrace doors, their brass handles cold and inviting. The snow beyond wrote its gentle script. "A minute," she said, and surprised herself by wanting it. They stepped out together. The terrace stones were dusted, but not yet slick. Heat lamps hummed in tall bronze towers. Beneath them, air held the faint scent of cedar and something like vanilla from the lobby. The mountains breathed an old grand breath. Lila tucked her hands into her coat pockets and lifted her face to the snow. "I had not planned," Ethan said after a moment, "for the first thing I said to you to be about cufflinks." "Cufflinks are neutral," Lila said, "which was kinder than I was not planning for you at all." True. This was always easier when I did not lead with the wrong thing. He exhaled a soft, amused sound that carried regret beneath it. "How are you, Lila?" Not the sentence people say to be polite. The real one. She considered. The person she had been years ago might have made a quip to build a bridge over the water. The person she was now understood that sometimes you have to name the river. "I am good," she said slowly. "Different than I was. Less certain in some ways, more certain in others. I like quiet. I like mornings that are mine. I like my work most days. I have learned the shape of my own company, and I have learned that forgiveness is not a door you walk through once." Snow settled on the shoulder of his sweater and stayed a moment before surrendering. He nodded, a small, grateful movement. "That sounds like a life you built with care." "It is," she said. "And you?" He smiled, the kind worn by someone who has climbed and descended and climbed again. "I have tried to be the person I said I was. It turns out the older I get, the more I mean things. I still work too much when a problem refuses to yield. I still forget lunch. I have a porch with 2 chairs now. On good evenings, I use both, one for sitting and one for my feet. My sister's kids think I am a jungle gym. I read more. I think about the past sometimes and wonder how I could have been braver or softer." Lila looked out over the railing, where the slope fell away into a hush of white. "Softer is terrifying, and brave is sometimes just another word for tender," he said. They stood together beneath the hush of falling snow, not touching, not yet. The heat lamps made halos that painted the air gold. Lila could have told him to go. She could have turned the minute into a boundary and called herself wise. Instead, after a long, generous silence, she spoke the sentence neither of them had wanted to open, and both had needed. "You hurt me," she said quietly. "Years ago. I know we had reasons. I know it was complicated, but I want it said true at least once." His answer arrived without defense. "I did," he said. His voice roughened at the edge, and I have never liked the part of the story where that is my role. "I am sorry, Lila. Not with a bow on it. Just sorry." The words landed and did not break her. They settled into the snow between them, honest and visible. She breathed out, and something in her chest shifted, an old piece of ice cracking, water moving underneath. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. "We do not have to figure anything out tonight." "No," he agreed. "We have a wedding to make beautiful. We have a bride who believes in Coco as civic duty. We have," he looked at her, really looked, "time at least until midnight makes its demands." She smiled despite herself. "Midnight is greedy like that." "Then we will be generous before it arrives," he said, and the line was easy on his tongue, but not glib. He reached for the terrace door and held it open, not in a chivalrous flourish, only in the way a person says, "After you," and saves the world, a small indignity. Inside, warmth met them with gratitude. Greta reappeared with a new set of questions about candles that refused to stay lit near the doors. Maya swooped in, eyes flicking between them, relief softening her face at whatever she read there. Lila returned to the escort cards, aligning names with tables. Her hands did not shake. Her work was the same as it had been before Ethan had walked in, and also nothing was the same. That dual truth no longer frightened her. When the meeting broke at last and the staff began to tuck the ballroom in for evening, Maya linked her arm through Lila's again. "There you are," she whispered, breathing, somewhat extravagantly. "But yes," Lila said, and they both laughed. "Come see the ice arch," Maya pleaded. "It is finished, and I swear to you it sings." They went together through a side hall to the courtyard. The arch glowed in the dusk like something the sky had remembered how to make. Its facets caught every stray light and turned them into stars. Lila stood very still and let the beauty do what beauty does, take the noise away. In the reflection on the ice, she saw the night ahead, rehearsals and lists, candles and ribbon, friends and family, promises, and the careful choreography of celebration. She also saw, unexpected and unmistakable, her own face eased around the eyes, as if someone had smoothed a thumb along a worry and arranged it more kindly. Snow ticked lightly against her coat. Somewhere down the corridor, Ethan's voice mingled with Greta's in calm consultation. Lila closed her eyes for a breath, opened them again, and let the arch keep singing. Tomorrow would bring tasks and timelines. The evening after that would carry a countdown and fireworks, and the world kissing its way into a brand new year. Between here and there lay 100 small choices about candles and corsages, about courage and care. For now, she walked back through the warmth with Maya, let herself be folded into the hotel's hush, and told the elevator mirror once more, this time with a smile that surprised her by being easy. "We will be gracious. We will be fine. The mirror, being kinder now, seemed to agree. Chapter 2. Snow Between Us. The next morning arrived with a sky the color of pearl, faint light pressing through gauzy clouds. Snow had fallen overnight, smoothing every rooftop and railing into soft white curves, and the air seemed to hum with a hush that only mountains knew how to keep. Lila stood at the window of her suite, a mug of coffee, warming her hands, and tried to steady her breathing. Down below, the resort courtyard was already a flurry of motion. Staff hauling crates of champagne, decorators balancing ladders to drape garlands, a team of chefs wheeling carts toward the kitchens. She caught sight of the ice arch, gleaming in the pale light, magnificent and a little fragile, as though it might shatter if one stared too intently. Her reflection in the glass looked thoughtful, lips pressed together. Today will be fine, she told herself. It is a rehearsal day. You will keep busy. You will not think about Ethan. But thinking about not thinking of him was already its own admission. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Maya, hair tucked under a wool cap, cheeks glowing from the cold. "Rescue me," her friend said, with mock desperation. The florist needs an extra pair of eyes, and Greta insists on triple-checking the seating chart. You are the only sane person I trust. Define sane, Lila teased, slipping into her boots and coat. Breathing upright and capable of saying that centerpiece is crooked, Maya declared. Congratulations, you qualify. They wound their way down to the ballroom, where the air smelled faintly of pine and candle wax. Long tables were half-dressed in snowy linens, crystal glasses, waiting like rows of frozen stars. The florist stood at the center, rearranging an elaborate arrangement of white roses and evergreen boughs, muttering about symmetry. Greta was nearby, clipboard in hand, radiating authority. And Ethan was there too. He was crouched beside a crate of candles, sleeves pushed up, forearms dusted with wax, as he tested each taper in its holder. The sight of him, casual, absorbed, competent, was a blow and a balm all at once. He looked up as they entered, his gaze catching hers before she could look away. A smile ghosted his mouth, not the easy grin of the boy she had once loved, but something quieter, more careful. "Morning," he said, voice warm enough to melt a fraction of her resolve. "Morning," she managed, forcing her attention to the nearest tablecloth. Greta clapped her hands lightly. "Perfect, you are here. Lila, would you walk with Ethan and me through the ceremony space? I need a coordinator's perspective and a best man's cooperation. Maya, the florist needs your approval on whether the hydrangeas should be ivory or cream." Maya shot Lila a look of exaggerated sympathy, then let herself be swept away in a cloud of flowers. Greta, efficient as always, ushered Lila and Ethan towards the grand doors that opened into the chapel hall. The chapel had been transformed overnight into something almost ethereal. Pew ends were wrapped in evergreens, lanterns lined the aisle, and an enormous window framed the snowy slope outside, so that the world itself seemed part of the decor. "Stunning," Lila murmured despite herself. "It is," Ethan agreed, his voice reverent. Greta walked ahead, measuring distances between pews, muttering numbers, We will run through the entrance later today. For now, I just need to confirm timing with the band and the lighting crew. She disappeared toward the back, already on her phone, leaving Lila and Ethan alone in the glowing silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. Snow drifted lazily beyond the window, flakes catching the light like slow-moving stars. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "You still have that way of noticing everything. I watched you in the ballroom. Your eyes always catch the smallest detail. A candle out of line, a thread on the tablecloth. You used to do that when we were young, too." She turned toward him, startled. "You remember that?" His gaze softened. "I remember a lot more than you might think." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. She looked away, unwilling to drown in them. "Details matter," she said briskly. "Especially at a wedding." "True," he allowed. But his tone carried layers she didn't dare peel back. By afternoon, the resort was humming with rehearsals. Lila and Ethan were inevitably swept together again, tasked with checking place cards against the seating chart. They sat at opposite ends of a long oak table, stacks of ivory cards between them, passing names back and forth like reluctant conspirators. "Grant's uncle insists on sitting near the band," Ethan muttered, scribbling a note. "Apparently, he fancies himself a singer." Lila smiled despite herself. "That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen." "Or a memorable performance," Ethan countered, and she caught the glint of humor in his eyes before she quickly returned to her cards. A moment later, their hands brushed as they both reached for the same pen. The touch was fleeting, accidental, but it jolted through her like static, vivid and undeniable. She pulled back too quickly, the pen clattering against the table. "Sorry," he said softly. "It is fine," she replied, though her pulse betrayed her. They worked in silence after that, the scrape of chairs and the shuffle of cards, the only sounds. Yet beneath the quiet stretched something taut, a thread neither of them could cut. Late in the day, a snow squall swept across the mountain, flurries spinning thick and fast. Greta fretted about garlands, blowing loose on the terrace. Volunteers scattered to secure ribbons and lanterns. Lila found herself outside, boots sinking into fresh powder as she struggled with a spray of evergreens, tugged nearly sideways by the wind. "Hold on," a voice called, and suddenly Ethan was there, steadying the arrangement. With one strong hand while his other anchored her elbow, his touch was firm, grounding. Together, they pressed the garland back into place until the ties held. The wind whipped her hair across her cheek, and she laughed breathlessly. "This resort really should charge extra for weather drama." Ethan's smile flashed, genuine and unguarded. "At least it gives us a chance to play heroes." For a moment, as they stood shoulder to shoulder in the swirling snow, it felt achingly like old times, like the summers when storms had blown across the lake and they had raced to rescue canoes, laughing until rain plastered their clothes. The memory stung and soothed all at once. When the gusts eased, he released her arm slowly, as though reluctant, You always did run towards the chaos instead of away from it. Someone has to, she said lightly, though her voice wavered. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a heartbeat, she thought he might say more. But Greta's voice rang out from the terrace steps, calling for Ethan to check lanterns on the far side. He gave a small nod and jogged off, leaving her breathless in the fading storm. That evening, after the rehearsal dinner, Lila escaped to the terrace alone. The snow had stopped, leaving the world hushed and luminous under moonlight. She leaned against the railing, watching her breath curl into the night, trying to quiet the storm inside her chest. She didn't hear his footsteps until he was beside her. "Still your favorite place," Ethan said softly. "The edge of the party." She glanced at him, startled. "You remember that too?" "I remember you sneaking outside at every dance, every celebration. You always needed a moment to breathe." Her throat tightened. "And you always found me." Silence stretched, filled only by the distant hum of laughter drifting from the ballroom. "Lila," he began, voice low, "I know I have no right to ask, but are you happy?" She closed her eyes, the question pressing against old wounds. "I built a life that is safe. That counts for something. But is it happy?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. The truth trembled too close to the surface. When she finally opened her eyes, he was watching her with a mixture of regret and something else, something that looked dangerously like hope. Snow fell again, light and feathery, dusting their shoulders. For a moment, it felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting. Chapter 3: Cracks in the Ice. The rehearsal the next day carried a hum of anticipation. Staff bustled about with ribbons and candles. The florist fussed over arrangements that seemed already perfect, and the air inside the chapel pulsed with the promise of vows yet to be spoken. Lila busied herself with Greta's lists, checking that lanterns had fresh batteries, ensuring the musicians had enough chairs. She told herself that if she kept her hands moving, her thoughts would not betray her. But thoughts had their own persistence, and every time she glanced toward Ethan, stationed near the altar to coordinate with Grant, they found her anyway. He wore a tailored suit that looked effortless, his posture straight, his voice calm as he confirmed cues with the officiant. Watching him was like reading a book she had loved once and set aside, only to find the words had been waiting for her all along. When the rehearsal ended, laughter spilled out of the chapel, and the bridal party drifted toward the dining hall for one last dinner before the big day. Maya swept past with Grant, cheeks flushed with joy, while Greta vanished in a whirl of logistics. Lila lingered at the back, gathering discarded programs, when Ethan approached. "Walk?" he asked simply. Her first instinct was to refuse, to hold her boundaries like armor. But something in his tone, steady, unpretending, dissolved her resistance. She nodded once. They walked out into the snow-laced evening. The air was cold, crisp enough to sting her nose, but the sky was clear, stars scattered like diamonds above the mountain ridge. The path along the frozen pond was lined with lanterns, their glow soft and golden against the white. The world seemed hushed, as if granting them a space to speak. For a while, they walked in silence, the crunch of boots against snow the only sound. Finally, Ethan stopped near the edge of the pond where the ice gleamed pale under starlight. "I do not want to keep pretending," he said quietly. "Not after last night. Not after seeing you here again." Lila's heart pounded. "Pretending what?" "That we do not have history," he said. His eyes found hers, steady and unflinching. "That it does not matter. That I did not hurt you." Her breath clouded in the air between them. She folded her arms, as much for warmth as for courage. "You did hurt me. More than anyone else ever has." He flinched, but he nodded. "I know." The honesty in his voice cut deeper than denial ever could. "You made a choice," she continued, her words tumbling now that they had begun. "You left without letting me fight for us, without trusting me to decide what I could or could not bear. You walked away and you asked me to understand. And I tried, Ethan. I really tried. But it felt like betrayal." He closed his eyes briefly, as though absorbing the weight of her truth. When he opened them again, there was sorrow there, but no retreat. "You are right. I did not trust you enough. I thought I was sparing you. My career was in pieces, and I felt like I was drowning. I told myself walking away was noble, but it was cowardice. I was afraid you would see me fail." Her throat tightened. The memory rose, the long nights waiting for phone calls, the unanswered letters, the final conversation where he had ended it with quiet finality. "You should have let me choose," she whispered. "I know," he said again. His voice was rough. "And I have regretted it every day since." The admission hung in the air, like fragile glass. Lila turned her gaze to the frozen pond, the surface reflecting stars that seemed impossibly far away. She had waited years to hear words like these, yet they brought no neat resolution, only the ache of what had been lost. "Regret does not change the past," she said softly. "No," he agreed. "But maybe it can change the future if you let it." Her eyes flicked back to him, searching for the man she had once loved. He stood steady in the snow, older now, tempered, but the same warmth lived in his eyes, the same steadiness she had once trusted with all of herself. "You still mean that?" she asked. "After all this time?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I never stopped." Her breath caught, a sharp ache blooming in her chest. She wanted to believe him, but belief was not easy after years of silence. "I built a life without you," she said. "I learned to stand on my own. I am not the girl you left behind. I would not want you to be," he replied. "I want you as you are now. Strong, independent, certain of yourself. I want to know this version of you, if you will let me." His words cracked something inside her, a sheet of ice breaking under sunlight. She looked away quickly, blinking against tears she had not expected. "I do not know if I can risk it again," she whispered. "What if you leave? What if I let you back in and you walk away twice?" He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cold. Then let me prove I will not. Let me stay, whatever it takes. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of stars and breath and the sound of her own heart trying to decide between fear and longing. They returned to the lodge slowly, conversation light but edged with awareness. Inside, the fire in the lounge glowed bright and laughter echoed from the dining hall. They paused near the hearth where garlands shimmered and glasses of champagne clinked. Ethan glanced at her. "May I sit with you a while?" No heavy talk, just company. She hesitated, then nodded. They chose a quiet corner by the window, mugs of cocoa between them. Outside, snow fell again, delicate and persistent. They spoke of safer things, Maya's impossible energy, Grant's steadfast calm, the beauty of the mountain trails. Slowly, the tension eased, replaced by something gentler, something that felt almost like the beginning of trust. When she finally rose to leave, Ethan stood too. He didn't try to touch her, didn't push for more. He simply said, "Good night, Lila." She met his gaze. "Good night, Ethan." As she walked back to her suite, her heart was heavy and light all at once. Cracks had opened in the ice she had carried for years. Through them, something fragile and luminous was beginning to shine. Chapter 4. Frosted Vows. Morning arrived wearing a veil of pale gold. The mountain breathed a shy light over snow-laden firs, and the sky held itself in that quiet blue that promises clear weather and keeps it. Lila woke before her alarm and lay still, listening to the gentle hush of the world beyond the glass. The day had a pulse. She felt it in the way the air seemed to wait, attentive and kind. Downstairs, the resort had slipped into its ceremonial rhythm. Staff moved with practiced grace. Bellmen wheeled garment bags past winter bouquets. Somewhere a hairdryer, word in time with laughter. The ballroom, when Layla stepped inside, looked like a dream that had made itself tangible. Tables glistening under frosted garlands. Candles cupped in glass. Tiny lights tucked like stars into evergreen boughs. The ice arch in the courtyard caught the early sun and woke it again in 100 small reflections. It was as if winter had decided to teach the room how to glow. Greta stood at the center of it all, clipboard in one hand, a walkie in the other, and an expression that combined fierce competence with pure joy. "You are early," she said, without looking up, which meant she had known Layla was coming. "Bless you." Maya is with the stylist. Grant is with his father, trying to make a pocket square remember its purpose. I am about to negotiate with a baker who just discovered that gravity is a concept that applies to croquembouches. "Use the tone," Lila said, setting down her gloves. "The one that makes people believe you are the voice in their head they should have listened to sooner." Greta smiled, then exhaled in something like relief. "How are you?" Lila considered. "Steady, grateful, alert." "Good," Greta said, as if these were items to check off the sacred list. "Would you do one last pass on escort cards?" Someone always decides to get engaged the morning of a wedding, and should not be punished for optimism. They worked companionably, adjusting names, swapping a seat here for a seat there. The room rustled with warmth. In the adjoining hall, The quartet ran through a soft arrangement of a folk melody Maya loved. Lila's fingers were deft, her mind clear, but her heart, with its new cracks and thaw, moved with a gentler cadence than it had the day before. It surprised her how bearable that tenderness felt. Eventually, Greta lifted her head, eyes narrowing slightly, as if tracking weather. "He will be here any minute," she said, voice casual but not careless. "Ethan?" Lila asked, not bothering to pretend confusion. "Yes. He promised me he would rehearse his toast once more with the band leader and then stop tinkering with the lanterns, because he is not, in fact, employed as a lantern whisperer." Greta's mouth softened. "You both looked not unwell last night." "We talked," Lila said. The words made a small, honest light inside her chest. "We said things that had waited too long." Greta's smile reached the good corners of her eyes. Imagine that. A wedding serving its secret purpose. Before Lila could reply, Maya swept into the ballroom in a swirl of silk robe and hairpins, laughter crisscrossing her face like sunlight. "I am 5 minutes early and 3 metaphors deep into an ode to the bouquet," she announced. "Do not be alarmed." "You are luminous," Lila said, because it was true, and because her friend needed no reminders. Beyond those warmth-giving words, "I am terror and delight and hairspray," Maya said, then fixed on Lila, the flash of mischief easing into a steady affection. "How is your heart?" "Present," Lila said. "Not hiding, not sprinting. Present." "That is all I want for you," Maya whispered, squeezing Lila's hands. "Well, that and cocoa at intervals." She inhaled, composed herself, and segued without a hitch into bridal director mode. "Greta, tell me we have solved the saga of the ring-bearer's nap. We have bribed the nap with a sandwich and a story." Greta said primly. "It surrendered." "Perfect," Maya replied, then waltzed away to approve ribbon widths and carriage the flower girl's petals with solemn instruction. Later, in the quiet, before guests began to arrive, Lila stepped onto the terrace. The view was the same as yesterday and entirely new because she was. Snow spooled lazily from a high cloud, the flakes so thin and bright, they looked like the air had decided to sparkle. The ice arch hummed its cold song. She stood with her palms on the railing, breathing the clean mountain breath, letting gratitude uncurl like steam. Footsteps approached. She did not turn right away. She knew the sound of him now, measured, unhurried, a presence that asked permission from the world. "Good morning," Ethan said, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, far enough to prove he had kept his promise to let her choose. "Good morning," she answered, facing him at last. He wore a dark suit, simple and exact, the kind of attire that respected the occasion rather than performed for it. At his lapel, a small spray of evergreen and white rose. The sight of it tugged at something tender. He smiled, that softened thing she was learning again. "You look at peace," he said. "I am trying to be honest with the day," Lila answered. "Honest seems like the most elegant dress code." He laughed under his breath, then grew quiet. I wanted to say this before everything begins. He glanced at the arch as if asking the ice to witness. If today were only about me, I would ask you for an answer. But it is not. It is about vows that belong to our friends. So I will ask only this. Let me carry the corner of this day with you. We do not have to decide what tomorrow holds at midnight, but we can be on the same side for now. Lila's mouth tilted into something she had not worn in a long time. A smile unafraid of its own softness. Yes, she said simply. Stand with me. He nodded once, relief not loud, but palpable. Beneath the arch, a drip from some warming facet fell and shattered into glitter on the stone. The sound was small and ceremonial, like a bell. Guests arrived in a slow cascade. Coats surrendered to attendants, cheeks kissed. Laughter folded into the lobby's highlight. The quartet's music gathered them toward the chapel. Lila took her place by the doors with Greta, steady hands smoothing unseen creases, voice calm, eyes everywhere at once. Ethan stood near the front with Grant, whose nervousness expressed itself in 100 harmless fidgets. Lila could feel Ethan's presence as a kind of shared gravity across the aisle. Then the chapel doors opened and the ceremony unspooled with the elegance of a ribbon untying itself. Maya entered on her father's arm, bouquet of winter white cradled against silk. The collective breath of the room rose like a flock of birds. Grant's expression, when he saw her, rearranged itself into devotion. Vows followed, promises that managed to be both specific and eternal, spoken clearly, with a tremor of sincerity. Rings, a kiss, laughter edged with tears. Through it all, Lila held the quiet joy of her friend's happiness, the way one holds a candle in a gentle wind. After the recessional, the room blossomed into congratulation. Lila shepherded grandparents toward photographs, pressed tissues into hands, solved 2 small crises that never became crises at all. When the wedding party slipped away for portraits among snow-draped pines, she allowed herself a moment at the back, leaning against a pillar, watching the guests dissolve into clusters of warmth. Ethan appeared at her side, with the respectful magic of someone who has learned how to arrive without intruding. You did that, he said softly, nodding toward the glow. No one knows, but you did. They will credit the room and Maya's taste, Lila said. As it should be. And I will credit you, he returned, as I should. She did not look at him, not yet. The gratitude that rose at his words was simple and clean. She let it be. Cocktail hour brought small plates that felt like celebrations, tiny tartlets of caramelized onion, spoons of smoked trout with dill, cups of spiced squash soup that warmed fingers and hearts. The champagne began its soft chorus. Lila checked that the musicians had what they needed, that the elders found seats where conversation could be heard without shouting, that someone remembered the lacto-free guest when the first tray of canapes circled. Ethan affixed a wayward boutonniere with a gentleness that made the older man wearing it grin like a conspirator. They moved around each other with a new rhythm. Not the old seamlessness, not yet, but a cadence that belonged to this moment and did not apologize for existing. In the ballroom, the first toasts rose like lanterns. A cousin told a story about a childhood snow fort, granting the room a shared memory that wasn't theirs and then making it theirs anyway. Greta floated in and out like a benevolent spirit, adjusting lights, shepherding courses. The dinner arrived, perfect and timely. A choreography of white plates and gleaming cutlery. Lila allowed herself to sit for more than a minute, to taste the herb-crusted lamb, to notice the way laughter sounds different after vows have been spoken, lower, fuller, trusting itself. Then the band leader nodded to Ethan. He stood, glass in hand. The room settled, the way people do when they recognize the tone before the first word. Lila placed her fingertips lightly on the table's edge. "I am Ethan," he began, straightforward as always. "And I have known Grant for long enough to know that when he loves something, he tends it. He is not dramatic about it. He simply builds a place for that love to live, and then keeps it warm. Maya," he turned toward the couple, and his voice softened in a way that it tugged at Lila's ribs. "You are the warmest place I have ever seen him keep. Thank you for choosing him, again and again." There was a murmur, the affectionate kind. He continued, a smile ghosting across his mouth. "I thought a lot about what makes vows work. We talk about love as a fire, and it is, but fires need tending. They need air and attention. They need boundaries so they do not run wild. And sometimes they need quiet. Moments when you simply sit beside them and let them do what they do. Turn cold into warm, raw into cooked, alone into together." Lila swallowed, the words threading themselves through more than the couple's night. "I have made mistakes," Ethan said. Then, not coy, not grand, just true, sent into the room without expecting it to catch them. "And I have learned that the bravest thing two people can do is tell the truth kindly and keep choosing each other without performance. Grant and Maya, you have that courage. May your home be a place for winter and summer both. May your arguments be short, your laughter long, and your kisses impractical." Laughter rolled softly. He lifted his glass, to vows, to tending, to choosing again. Glasses rose. The room drank. Lila found the helpful anchor of breath and stayed with it. The toast was not about her. It was not a coded telegram, and yet some part of it, like music from the next room, reached her anyway. The cake arrived, a tower of sugared evergreens and crystalline berries. There was smearing and laughter and a kiss that tasted of buttercream. Then the first dance, Maya leaning into Grant, as if destiny were a comfortable coat, the band making of a familiar melody, something gentle and particular. Guests followed, the floor filling with people who had decided that rhythm mattered less than closeness. "Dance with me?" Ethan's voice at her shoulder again. Inviting, not insisting. "Perhaps later," Lila said, and her smile took any sting out of it. "I have an appointment," with a basket of emergency safety pins. He inclined his head, accepting the terms. "I will hold the second dance for you." "You may have the third," she said, letting playfulness return to her, like a small bird to a familiar branch. "Third," he agreed solemnly, as if they were negotiating a treaty, and then he let the moment go. Time became a pleasant blur, refilling a grandmother's tea, coaxing a toddler to admire the lights instead of dismantling them, finding a missing shoe that had been cleverly disguised as an object beneath a chair. When Layla finally exhaled beside the terrace doors, the night outside had deepened to velvet, and the stars had stitched themselves into the dark in patterns people have told stories about for centuries. She pressed a hand to the glass and felt the cool come through, a reminder that beauty asks us to notice it with our bodies too. The bandleader called for the last song before the countdown. The floor brimmed with embraces. Lila stepped outside to make sure the fireworks crew had their cues and found the head pyrotechnician already in place, a woman with fox-bright eyes and a professionalism that could have lit the sky by itself. "We are synced to the big clock," she assured Lila. "On the stroke or a breath after." "The stroke," Lila said, hearing Ethan's voice in her memory. Light exactly when promised. She turned to go back in and found him there, having approached without stealing her breath so much as asking it to become useful. "Third dance," he said, offering his hand with a small courtesy that asked nothing more than yes. "Third dance," she confirmed, and placed her hand in his. They stepped onto the edge of the floor as the band eased into a song that understood goodbyes and beginnings were often the same note held longer. Ethan's palm settled warm at her shoulder blade. Lila let the music do half the work and trust do the rest. They moved together without rush. It was not the dizzy spin of the past. It was steadier, a conversation shared by bodies that remembered the language and had learned new grammar. "You were brave today," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I know it costs something to stand where you stood." "So were you," she replied. That toast was a door opened without checking who might walk through. He smiled. "I hoped you would." "I did," she said. They did not discuss tomorrow. The music did not ask them to. When the final chord sighed into the air, the bandleader lifted a hand, and the room began to count. 10, the crowd chanted, voices layered with laughter. 9, 8. The ballroom seemed to lean forward, as if the building itself had learned to hope. 7, 6. Ethan's thumb found the edge of Lila's hand and rested there, not moving a point of certainty. 5, 4. Greta stood near the doors, walkie poised, eyes bright with the relief of things unfolding as planned. 3, 2. Lila inhaled. She did not think of the city or the years or the long stretch of regret that had once seemed endless. She thought only of the strange grace of being here and ready. 1. Midnight arrived like a soft bell. The terrace doors swung open, the sky answered with light, and fireworks bloomed above the mountain in whispered roses and rivers of white. A cheer rose, champagne kissed glass, friends reached for friends. Ethan looked at Layla, not asking, simply offering the moment to her. She stepped closer and lifted her face. Their kiss was not a recitation of youth. It did not pretend nothing had happened in the space between. It was new, made of this winter and this willingness, a vow carved in breath and warmth. "I will meet you where we are." It deepened gently, and then as the fireworks drew silver, cursive across the night, it rested. They stood forehead to forehead as light fell like snow. When the sky quieted, they remained there, hands still joined. The room exhaled into the first minutes of the year, and a dozen kinds of music began again. "We have not promised anything impossible," Ethan said softly. "No," Lila answered. "Only the possible, undertaken with care." He nodded, the smile in his eyes, not bright but enduring. "What does possible look like tomorrow?" "Coffee," she said promptly, relief and joy twining in her voice. "A walk in the cold, being honest again." "And the day after?" "Perhaps I will stay one more day," she said, letting the words take root in the sound of their saying. "And when I go home, we will keep talking, slowly, kindly. No grand gestures that burn out, only the kind that stay lit. Lanterns, not flares," he said. "Exactly," she replied, and realized she was smiling, the way people do when something inside them has relearned ease. Around them, Maya and Grant moved through a sea of embraces. When Maya reached Lila, she folded her into a hug and whispered against her ear, "Happy New Year." "Your eyes are different. They are seeing the same things," Lila murmured back, "only clearer." Maya squeezed, then dragged Grant toward the terrace to catch the last sparks of light. Greta slid by, setting a misplaced candle to rights, because even midnight required attention. She spared Lila one glance, an entire conversation fitted into a single look. Satisfaction, pride, affection, the quiet of a job well done. Lila offered a small salute with her empty flute. Greta tapped her clipboard lightly in reply and disappeared into the competent hum she wore like a favorite coat. Ethan guided Lila toward the windows. Snow had started again, fine as sifted sugar. The mountains shone. The ice arch mirrored a dozen fireworks that had ceased and still seemed to be happening. People swayed and laughed and cried, because New Year's make poets of everyone for a minute. Lila thought of the girl who had taught herself to live with armor, and how that girl had been necessary. She thought of the woman who was learning that armor could be set down and replaced with attention. She thought of the winter silence that does not deny sound but makes room for it. She thought of love, not as a story she had already told, but as a room with the windows open. "Walk with me in the morning?" Ethan asked, as if repeating a line from a poem he hoped she would mark. "Yes," she said, "and the morning after that, if weather and patience allow." "They will," he said, and for once, the promise felt like something the world could keep. They stood together while the band started a song people know by heart, but pretend to be surprised by. Someone requested more cocoa, and someone else wept at the sudden memory of a relative who loved fireworks. The night accepted all of it without judgment. Lila leaned into Ethan's shoulder, the weight of her head a small declaration that required no ceremony. When at last they returned to the terrace, the air met them with that sweet shock only winter can give. The fireworks crew waved, satisfied with a job conducted in sparks and precision. Far below, the valley cradled lights from cabins and quiet roads. The sky had begun to show the faintest suggestion of a new weather front, a silver whisper to the east. "Happy New Year," Ethan said, and the words felt both modest and enormous. "Happy New Year," Lila answered, and meant it the way people mean a vow. They do not take it lightly, but they do not make it heavy enough to break. They lingered a little longer, watched a last sparkle drift down and vanish into snow. The ice arch hummed one more note and fell silent. Behind them, their friends danced. Ahead of them, the deck where the morning would arrive with coffee and breath and simple plans. When they finally turned back inside, Layla looked once more at the ballroom. The tables soft with candlelight, the floor sown with footsteps that would not be remembered and yet mattered, the garlands glowing like the undersides of clouds. She let the sight write itself into her, not as proof that she had managed this day, but as gratitude for having been allowed to tend it. Ethan reached for her hand. She gave it. And under the shimmer of frost and the hush that follows celebration, they began, not with a thunderclap, not with a flourish, but with the quiet courage to stay, to speak, to choose again when morning asked the simplest questions. Outside, snow fell, the way forgiveness does when it is ready, lightly, steadily, promising depth if you let it. Thank you for listening to Moonlit Romantic. For Lila and Ethan, winter was not just cold and quiet. It was a chance to thaw old wounds, to speak truths left unsaid, and to discover that some promises can be made new beneath the frost. If Frosted Vows warmed your heart tonight, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that love, like snow, can fall softly and still change everything. Until we meet again, dash dash. Rest easy, dream deeply, and remember, the heart can find its way home even in the hush of winter.